I see you in the darkness. I see you in the light. I see your light shining in through the night. Maybe it's time for a restraining order, Dave. Let us be your sunshine on a rainy day. It's This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Come on in. The doors are open.
Wingdings Commander.
The Amiga is ugly. Ugh.
All this and more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, Neil.
Hello, Dave. How are you?
I'm very well. It's afternoon, isn't it? Why is it afternoon, Neil?
Afternoon, because I wanted a lie-in, Dave, because I've just done another 7-day week.
You deserved it.
Thank you. Culminating in Sunday, which was a 5 a.m. start, and got home just before 8 p.m. So long old day, but it was another brilliant patron day at the cave.
Yeah. I'm tired too, so I was delighted to start later today. We normally record first thing in the morning, but today we're recording mid-afternoon. Is this late afternoon? Mid-afternoon.
Mid-afternoon, yeah. Do you think there'll be a different energy about us? For
I hope so. Maybe this will be a good show for a change.
Are you pumped, Dave?
I'm pumped. I'm absolutely raring to go. Let's go right into this. Yes!
Oh, you missed your calling as a wrestler.
Not only are you a hot dog.
Okay,
liar too. I can't do his voice right.
Was that no, which one was that? Which one was
that? Was I don't. I said no anything about the wrestlers other than the monologues they do. The one that the cream of the crop, and he got a little pot.
I can see his face.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
There he is. Yeah, he was no Shirley Crabtree, but he was
That's
good.
Big Daddy.
Anyway, back on topic. I believe you have a stack of things next to you that you're really excited about today.
Yeah. This stack, which if you're listening is still here, trust me, it is a stack of 7 big box games. They're all new. 3 of them are showed already. The other 4 have arrived just at the weekend there. They're from Polyplay, and they are all but one of them are brand new text adventures, and I've chosen the Amstrad CPC ones. Brand new text adventures. I'm dead excited to get big box games. Some of them are Infocom style boxes, and the last of them is Memories of Infocom, which I got because I was getting other stuff. And within the box, there's a cassette tape and a CD and an SD card, and it is Infocom inspired music. But it's
what is it? Like the sound of key taps?
Yes, that's what it is. No, it's a soundtrack inspired by Infocom, and each individual track is named after an Infocom game.
Well, that's nice, I suppose. You can look at something like Zork or, Hitchhiker's Guide or Suspense. Is that the one with the creepy face on the box? Whatever. You can take inspiration from these things.
That's what they've supposedly done. So I'm going to listen to music when I play them. I play these text adventures. I'm quite excited about it. Text Adventures is the theme this week for me, or at least for the initial chat. I started listening to a new podcast at the weekend called RetroAdventurers.com. And sorry, not called RetroAdventurers.com. That's their website, called Retro Adventurers, and they are a show they themselves say inspired by Eaten by a Gru, which is was an Infocom one, which went on to cover other things, but they have covered a couple of British games so far. They covered The Pawn, they've covered The Hobbit, so it's nice to see that kind of thing being covered. I thoroughly enjoyed the podcast. Unlike ours, it's quite cerebral. It goes quite into depth and analysis rather than...
No wrestling impressions?
No wrestling impressions at all so far. But I'm really enjoying it. They're only in episode 2, but it's exciting to get into something at the start when you know it's going to be good.
Yeah, very timely, because you saw the text adventure I've been having in the last week, haven't you? Yes. This was the Commodore PC20 restoration, and I've got to say, it's been very popular with visitors just in this first weekend. The first person who sat down on my Commodore PC20, which if you haven't seen it, lovingly restored with a completely new PCB from scratch, made up thanks to Chrissy and Ian and Rob at the Board Folk. They helped me to create a new motherboard to bring it back to life. And then I've tried to make it as inviting as possible with a lamp, which has now got actual lights in the little Hurricane lamp. So that lights up now. A selection of Infocom games, a Commodore 1401 monitor, which is a mono monitor with a really slow, lingering refresh on the phosphor.
What color is it?
Black and white, so it's not a nice amber one, but you've got to sit in front of this thing, Dave, and experience the way that phosphor slowly disappears when the screen refreshes. It's beautiful. And the first person to sit down spent an hour on it. Seriously, in a 3-hour visit to the cave, they spent an hour on it, and that just made me so happy. So, it's a big success.
There's something magical about the command prompt of a text adventure game.
The parser.
Yeah. Come to the cave and see that.
If you haven't sat down and played these before, surprisingly complex. Some of the things you can string together and the way it understands it and responds to it, it's a lot more complex than somebody who perhaps hasn't played a text adventure. Now, you may laugh at that with our audience, because who hasn't? There will be plenty of modern day gamers who have never tried that. So, yeah.
They are, there's certainly a timeless magic to them.
So that was on display on Saturday and at the Patron Day on Sunday. And then also on display was Computer Space. So this is the ongoing attempt to create a replica Computer Space arcade through 3D printing. It's looking stunning. And not only did we display it, and we had a big sign up saying no pictures because we don't want any spoilers before the final video goes out. Richard's also put all the guts in it. So it was fully working and playable, right down to you could put a coin in to get a credit. And just like the original cabinet, there's a biscuit tin inside it. So it makes a delightful clang when the coin falls into the machine. And then you can press start and you can play. You get the attention to detail he's gone in to with this thing is incredible. So I'm looking forward to revealing the final Computer Space. Just a couple more coats of resin to smooth it off. And then we can make the video. So
is it really going to end up with that shiny finish? Is it really going to end up that good?
Yeah, it's nearly there. It's still a little bit rough because it needs a couple of coats, but you can already see the potential of it just to finish it off and make it shiny. And he's used techniques which people have said they said it couldn't be done, Dave. He's used techniques where they said it couldn't be done, but Richard, he finds a way. So no spoilers.
I'm really looking forward to seeing that in person when I come down later on this year. I hope to run my hands over the smooth edges of it.
Yeah,
it looks straight out of a Star Trek set, the original Star Trek set. It just looks that kind of that retro futurism.
It does, and it's an interesting size as well because anyone of your height or my height has to stoop a little bit to actually play the game. Oh. Yeah. It's the original size, but that's how they made it. So whether or not it was made to be used with a stool, I don't know, but it's ideal for kids. It's great height for them.
But anyone who hasn't seen Neil and I in person, Neil's 5'4" and I'm 5'2".
We both got hairy feet and we don't wear shoes.
Sing songs. Shall we go on to it now? We'll be talking too long.
Yeah, let's go into our first story.
As I've just said, I love a command prompt, a place to type something in and have a computer do it for me. Whether it's the black and white of a BBC Micro following the boot beep when you turn it on, or the yellow on blue of a CPC, I love a command line interface. The most famous of them all, though, has got to be MS-DOS. Neil, what's your favourite command line?
Yeah, I am fond of the yellow and blue on the CPC because it was my first. And I do like to have a yellow and blue colour scheme in PowerShell in the modern day, even.
Just to make you feel like it's a CPC.
Yeah, but I mean, the one I've used the most will probably has to be MS-DOS. That's the one I've typed the most characters into, so I'll go with that.
So MS-DOS was the Microsoft disk operating system that came out in the early 80s. And by the early 90s was by far the industry standard, despite its issues. Development ceased in 2000, so it very neatly fits into those 2 decades of the 80s and 90s. Originally named 86DOS, which was a clone of CP/M, It was written in 6 weeks and would go on to last beyond the era of booting to a command prompt and sat underneath Windows all the way up to Windows 98, which a lot of the time felt it was built on sugary stilts on top of DOS. And sometimes things would go wrong and you would see DOS suddenly blinking at you underneath Windows. It was originally intended to be for a wide range of 8086 base computers, but we all know it ended up being focused on just one flavour. That's the IBM PC or compatible. It had no multi-user support because Microsoft didn't want it to compete with its Unix-based product Xenix. For me, at least, the most important version of DOS is 5.0. And it's actually where they introduced the iconic MS-DOS logo. That's where the MS on top and the DOS below in red, purple, and yellow. That didn't appear till version 5, apparently. It's also the first version that I had at home myself. So that version came out in 1991, and at that point, the use of IBM PCs was exploding. Even more popular in the workplace than it had ever been, and spreading into people's homes.
What command did you type in to see what version you were running, Dave?
VER.
Yes.
There we go. And by the time MS-DOS came out in 1993, the flavour of it had changed and they were embracing home use.
The things about it. You weren't supposed to lick the screen, Dave.
No, the packaging. The packaging was flavoured.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the bottom left was banana flavour.
Oh, I'll have to go back and try that.
Installing DOS 6 or 6.2 or 6.22 was telling you about things that were suited for the home user, not just the business user. I'm not going to do a complete history of DOS here because there's loads that missed out. No. You can do a complete history of DOS. I'll ask you to do it in just a moment. But the reason we're speaking about it today is thanks to a submission from Life-Size Teddy Bear. I think they were first to submit it to the subreddit on Microsoft's own open source blog. If we'd done this earlier as normal, I'd be sober. They announced on the 24th of April that 10 years after version 1.25 and 2.0 had been open sourced, version 4 of MS-DOS is being open sourced.
What happened to version 3, Dave?
I don't know. Version 3 was a thing, and version 3.3, I'm sure that was a thing.
Yeah, it's always great to see companies release source code for others to look at, isn't it? And to learn from. In the case of DOS, it's really helpful, I think, for projects like FreeDOS and maybe DOSBox as well, just so that they can get insights into them and they can make their own versions better or at least more compatible, looking at the crazy tricks and quirks that were put in the original source code to get around problems and replicating them. That's great because the result ultimately is that it helps us to play old games on new hardware more easily. So I always applaud this sort of thing. Wasn't the smoothest release, though, was it, Dave? Did you read? There was another blog on os2museum.com entitled How Not to Release Historic Source Code.
I'm not sure if that's the one I read, but I did read about it. The source doesn't actually fully compile, so it's not usable in its current state. The source code has been modified by Microsoft even after its publication this week, reducing the historical value of the code, and also Microsoft claims to have lost some source code.
I don't think it's that Microsoft modified the code. I think it's that the code got modified when it was uploaded to the GitHub, sort of removed or... Well, no, I think Microsoft removed or changed some timestamps. I think that was true. And then something about the encoding of the text was changed to UTF-8 or something like that. I just read through the blog quickly. Something has changed, which meant it wouldn't compile. And people are saying, can you just give us the source code maybe in an archive where it can't and hasn't been changed, and then we can go from there. So I think it's still an unfolding situation.
Fair enough. It won't matter. In the long term, it won't matter too much.
Yeah. Also interesting to see how in that version, Microsoft rolled back because it had that multi-user direction in DOS 4, didn't it? That's the direction it wanted to go in. I think the complaint was the overall size of DOS 4 was a little bit too large. I think it was something like 96K of memory it took.
Were they thinking about launching Ultima 7 at that point?
Oh, maybe. So, but anyway, regardless of that, it was absolutely the right direction to go in to make the OS more secure, to make it more Unix-like in making it a multi-user operating system. And it really should have been fundamental to DOS and Windows that it was multi-user, but it took far too long for Microsoft to take that seriously and make it a multi-user operating system. And I would argue that Microsoft got caught with their pants down when the web took off and machines were connected to the outside world more and more, and they didn't have those layers of security built in that they would have done just from the local level for multi-user that would have applied to being open to the outside world. So it's a shame that DOS 4 wasn't more successful in that respect, and those features didn't take off and carry through to other versions. Quite a moment, really.
It's a funny thing that we're going to mention it when we come to your story this week, but how good Windows 95 and Windows 98 were, considering they were built on the sugary legs on top of DOS like they were. So yeah, it's they would have been much easier to implement had DOS been better at DOS version 4 long before they came around.
And there was a certain amount of, it's just for the consumer, it's just for the home user, that's okay. Whereas you would have been using, NT if you were in a business context, or you should have been using NT, which again had its own problems. It wasn't completely secure and it wasn't ready for the world of the web, but it was better than the 9X route for that purpose.
It's been open sourced, then that maybe opens the door for people to cut out parts of it that are not relevant, and maybe we'll end up with a smaller memory footprint to get around those memory problems that we had with early 90s games. I should say that problem, it's not a big problem because you can easily get around it now just through some careful management, but it would make it easier. It would make it easier if we get around that through perhaps some changes to it. Maybe someone will have it.
It would take quite the programmer to make a smaller footprint, though, because when it was being made back in the day, it was being made in assembly language, surely. It was being made to have the smallest footprint possible because the memory didn't exist, that it had to be done. So
but
it's
what if things like parallel port and so on weren't needed? There would be parts of it that definitely aren't needed.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Save
cutting those out.
1K here, 1K there.
Yeah.
It adds up.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. I'm delighted to see that it's come out, but maybe we'll end up with a gamer edition of MS-DOS with RGB. As I said, it's not all plain sailing, but have a look at the links in the subreddit if you want to know more about it. And hopefully, if you're like me, where you have not the faintest idea about assembly language, hopefully, if you're like me, it just means that in the future, we'll have DOS games being even more accessible.
I mentioned earlier this week that we'd created a brand new PCB with the help of the board folk for the Commodore PC20. And do you know where we got those PCBs manufactured, Dave?
Yes, I do know, because you told me already. It's PCBWay.com.
I got 10 boards made with them. And I know that Chrissy now from the board folk has actually they've got a GitHub with the board, but they've also uploaded the board to the shared project section of PCBWay. So if you happen to have a Commodore PC20 and you need a new board, you can go to PCBWay.com. You can go to their shared project section, just type in PC20 or PC10, whatever Chrissy's uploaded it as. And in one click, you can put that in your basket and you can get yourself a brand new Commodore PCB. So I think that's really cool that from that video comes the chance for other people to fix their machines.
Yeah, they have a shared projects library at PCBWay, and there is an enormous amount of stuff in it. If you browse through it, you'll maybe find something you didn't know you wanted.
It's dangerous. It's like flicking through eBay.
Yeah, but thank you for sponsoring us.
Yeah, thank you to PCBWay.com for helping to sponsor the show, keep the lights on, and keep Dave in microphone covers. Here's a fun story, Dave. Do you like a fun story?
Yeah. Especially this afternoon. I'm dead excited.
Oh, calm down, man. A fun story submitted by Devolution about an era of gaming that you and I remember well, Dave. It's the transition from DOS to Windows gaming. Now, there was a period where DOS was for gaming and Windows, well, that was for other stuff, and for good reason. The overheads of Windows ate into valuable system resources that games really did need. We were just talking about freeing up more DOS memory there in your story. It took longer to boot into Windows than it did DOS. It was just unnecessary for gaming. That's not to say there weren't exceptions. In Windows 3, for example, you could have certain games on there. But on the whole, DOS was for gaming. With the advent of Windows 95, that all began to change, and it wasn't instant, though. One of the first examples of a Windows 95 native game that I played, do you remember this, Dave? It was called Hover.
I think so. Was it shareware or was it freeware? I'm sure I got it on a cover disc.
No. It was on the Windows 95 CD itself.
That's why.
It was like a 3D game. You were like a hovering bumper car floating around. There was a castle, and you were collecting flags. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember playing it, and my impression was, not great. Not necessarily because it was in Windows. It was just a pretty basic game. And I thought, I'll drop back to DOS, and I'll free up some memory. Thank you very much, and I'll do some gaming over there. I think it was one of those things, Hover, to kind of encourage you perhaps to buy the Plus pack. You can have more games like this if you buy the Windows Plus pack, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, Windows 95 could run DOS games, though. You didn't have to drop back to DOS. So within the GUI of Windows, Microsoft had worked really hard to make Windows 95 as compatible as possible with DOS games. And all of this fed into the goal of making Windows 95 the ultimate multimedia platform, and games were an important part of that. In time, we would get technologies like DirectX, and games would develop to shift natively to run in Windows and use APIs designed to ease the development and the compatibility with all of the different types of hardware that we were using by them. But before all of that happened, before we had the DirectXs and all the rest to encourage gaming in Windows, and of course the extra memory and processing power, we would we would go back into DOS. And it was really wise, I think, of Microsoft when they bought out Windows 95 to try and tap into that back catalogue of DOS gaming and to try and make as many as possible run in Windows, because it wasn't an easy win, but it was an attractive win to draw you to that platform. Now, Devolution submitted this article this week on the Register, and it's about one game in particular that was part of this process, a game called Wing Commander 3. Dave is reaching back. I'm sure he's got a copy of it there somewhere. Was it Heart of the Tiger? Was that 3?
Yes, it was.
There it is. Oh, lovely big box version you've got there with Mark Hamill on the front, published by Origin. Now, it's a really nice combination of 3D space battles and full motion video storytelling. Dave is clattering the box around there. What have you got in the box, Dave?
A big foldy outy CD thing, because once they managed to get games in CD, they discovered that one CD isn't enough. So why not have 4?
4 CDs. Yeah. Is there a map in there of the star system? Anything else?
There's a Explore Byte on CD-ROM free, so some kind of advertising thing.
Oh, okay.
An install guide, Electronic Arts catalogue, and rather than a map, what you get is a fold-out guide on all the different fighters.
You got that in earlier Wing Commanders as well, and it formed part of the copy protection.
Yeah, and there's a play guide, and there is, of course, personalised guide to the TCS Victory.
Oh yeah, what's that? That's the equivalent of the aircraft carrier, isn't it?
Yeah, and finally, the box isn't big enough. Big poster.
Beautiful. Well, why are we talking about Wing Commander 3 and Windows?
I don't know. You said it, not me.
So the article on the Register talks about the lengths that Microsoft went to ensure compatibility with games. And part of that process included rocking up at a store with a van and buying one of every single piece of PC software off the shelves that they could to take back to headquarters and test. 2 bits of software would be given to each tester, and that tester was expected to try them out, test them to destruction, and report any bugs when it came to running them in Windows 95 back to the team to be looked at. Now, in Wing Commander 3, a bug was found by one tester, and that bug was that when you press Control and C to enable your cloaking device, Windows just wasn't capturing the key combo. So you had no way of cloaking. It turns out that was a result of Windows developers changing. Well, what does Control C do, Dave?
Cloaking device, you just told me.
No. In Windows.
Copy.
Control C, Control V, copy.
Yeah.
So Windows wasn't properly capturing it within the game because of the way the clipboard worked. And as a result, Windows developers changed how the clipboard worked, the whole code for the clipboard in Windows 95, because of this one game. So it's pretty neat. Pretty neat to think that one game changed the direction of that part of Windows. And important, I think, because it highlights just how influential gaming was and still is to the success of new technologies. Microsoft knew that gaming was key to their new operating system being a success, and it took it so seriously that it went down to the individual game level and said, in this one particular game, we can't have that. We've got to make sure that Control-C works so that nobody has a problem with it. I really like that. Now let's go back to let's zoom out a little bit from Wing Commander 3, the bigger view. Can you remember that transition from DOS to Windows? Did you find it painful, Dave?
Yeah, I think before we get any further, I want to talk about what Windows gaming brought to PC gaming, because it's, if anything, I think it's understated. It brought an end to what had happened with DOS gaming. As things got more complicated in DOS, all of a sudden they had to support different VISA display modes. They had to support different sound cards, all those compatibility issues. What Windows brought was a platform that sat on top of the hardware, and the games could then get the resources from Windows for sound and the resources for graphics from Windows through DirectX and through the various different other things there. And it meant that sound cards, for example, could get cheaper, and they could just work in Windows. So it was an incredible thing, but there was a transition period, and that's what we're talking about here.
It wasn't painless, was it? Because
no.
I remember just running Windows 3, for example, the amount of disk thrashing that was going on my PC because I didn't have enough memory. It was paging out to use the hard drive as virtual memory back and forward, and that was just running a word processor or just using Windows, never mind running a game on top. So we had to get through that painful transition.
Yeah, but there was a transition period where you couldn't really just make a game for Windows alone because so many people still use DOS. So most of the games we're talking about relied on, at least initially, having DOS and Windows working together. I don't remember too much pain. We've already talked about how much I love DOS today and the power of the command prompt, and I didn't find it too difficult because if it didn't run in Windows, you could either drop to DOS or you could reboot with a boot disk to DOS.
Did you have your Windows 95 PC set to boot to DOS first, and then you type Win to go to Windows, or would you just let it go into Windows?
No, but I knew how to stop it going into Windows.
F5? So, F8,
yeah,
F5?
One of those that give you the boot options. I think it was F5. And I also knew there was a shortcut you could tell it to drop to DOS with. So you could then send it back to DOS. You could go away and get a sandwich and come back, and it would be back in DOS for you. Yeah. So there was always ways around it. It wasn't as if you couldn't do what you wanted to do. And since we didn't have today's computers to compare to, it was fine. It was just a case of, it was certainly much quicker than waiting for a tape to load. You could just drop to DOS. And as I said, boot disks were great for it. Boot disks that we used in DOS to get XMS or EMS worked fine to stick in a computer and then get into DOS very quickly and then just go C : Ultima 7 and then run it. So what we had back then wasn't bad, but the advances as well were rapid. In the space of just a few years, we moved from Wolfenstein to Doom, Heretic, Duke 3D Descent, and all the other ones in between. And we'd gone from DOS, basic DOS, to DOS with drivers for different things, to DOS under Windows and to Windows on its own.
We went from dedicated MPEG decoding cards with DOS drivers to video cards that were, on the whole, powerful enough to decode video to a good standard, but it was the layers in Windows that were helping with that decoding. Yeah.
And Microsoft got absolutely buckets of criticism for compatibility problems. They were heavily mocked, and over time it's become clear that it's because they were trying to do something incredibly difficult. I mentioned the last story talking about wobbly stilts built on top of DOS, and that's what it felt like. But it's a miracle it was even possible to get Windows 95, Windows 98 working in the way they did and provide a platform on top of DOS for games to run on.
Can you also remember how dated Windows 3 felt and how refreshing and needed Windows 95 felt? It felt overdue, really.
You mentioned gaming in Windows 3, and all you really had that way that I can remember was games that found it easier to be made because they used the GUI of Windows 3. So you get Windows 3 style menus in fairly basic roguelike RPGs or strategy games. I don't remember anything of real note in Windows 3.1 for games.
I want to say Myst, although that was also possible in DOS. I want to say the Journeyman project. Do you remember that game?
I do remember. I've got it in my shelf somewhere.
Type thing.
But was that really dependent on Windows 3 though?
That one in particular, I think, was ran on Macromedia.
Okay.
What was it? Flash? It wasn't Flash. Don't know what it was back there. Director. Trying to remember now. Someone will tell us in the comments, but it was a Macromedia thing that it ran on, which ran in Windows. So there were games like that popping up. There were the desktop adventures, like Indiana Jones Desktop Adventures. Was that Windows 3 or 95? Can't remember now. But there were games that ran in Windows.
It didn't really feel that way. You booted into Windows 3.1 to write a letter, and you came back out again. Whereas Windows 95, that felt like where you wanted to be. Rather than DOS. But it took until Windows XP for them to have something super solid, although I think you know that as Windows 2000 because you were there. Before I got to Windows XP, you were using that version of Windows NT that proper people use rather than amateurs like myself.
Yeah, but that didn't really help because, the games were made for DOS, and by then, 98 and ME that games were made for. So there was that sort of transition, and then it all came together with Windows XP. Anyway, that's years ahead. That's years ahead of this transitional period. That's another transition. Yeah. Fond memories, and it's just a really nice article to read over on the Register. So go and have a read. All the links are in the show notes about Wing Commander. Maybe you can think of, or of some other examples that changed the shape and the history of how Windows was developed. I'd love to hear some of those stories. But I like that one in particular, especially because I'm so fond of Wing Commander 3. Must go back and visit that at some point. Did you know I'm pretty sure there was a version that did support those MPEG cards, like a specific Wing Commander 3 with a higher resolution video for some MPEG cards. Was it Real Magic, perhaps?
I'm looking at the requirements. It says required Intel or 100% compatible 486DX 50 megahertz or higher, MS-DOS 5, graphics 256 color VGA or SVGA, so it supported some low-end stuff.
Yeah, so it would have been a separate release for the Real Magic one. Now, what I'm going to do, something we set up on Sunday for people to enjoy that were visiting, I set up an Exodus tower with a CRT so that people could just try it out, and I could say, you've heard of Exodus. Perhaps you haven't been able to download the terabyte of file that it is. Just come and give it a go. It's not a permanent exhibit. It was just set up for people to try. And I've noticed that Exodus does have a selection of Real Magic games, and it emulates those cards. So I'll go and have a look after the show, see if I can see Wing Commander 3 and experience it in, with a few more P than whatever P the video is in. Mark Hamill, only more P. I think we'll close the story off there.
Housekeeping time with Dave is here. Have no fear, he'll keep things clear. It's housekeeping time with Dave.
I'd like to welcome two new patrons, Ollie and Ian. So welcome
Ollie, and welcome Ian. Thank you for becoming twirlers.
Yeah, twirlers are now able to watch the first part of the Q&A. Lots of them have watched it. I think almost half of them have already watched the Q&A that we released a few days ago. Part 2 will hopefully get out to you very soon. So thank you very much for your continued support. It means a lot to us. How can someone become a twirler, Neil?
Well, you spin around 3 times and then you go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro, and you can join. How many twirlers are there, Dave?
About 120 now, I think.
Wow, 120 people. Just imagine 120 people all twirling while listening to the show. You can become one of them. And if you do, we'll be very grateful and thankful for your support.
Our Z80 story last week got lots of people talking. So there's a few things to catch up on. So Mike Adams 9141 says, guys, the Z80 lives on already. Time to review the EZ80, which sounds way cooler if you call it the Easy 80, as used in the Aegon Light. And this is a package of the Z80 with other stuff in a single chip that we mentioned. Frank Triggs said the Z80 processor was also used in the Harrier Jump Jet. Did you know that, Neil?
I didn't know that, but I mean, technically it was used in the Harrier Jump Jet on Harrier Attacks on my Amstrad CPC.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, Harrier Jump Jet.
At 4 Nanook says, I go onto Amazon and see at least 10 different manufacturers of the Z80 and Z80A, most of them Chinese, in either 28 or 40-pin dip packages from $5 to $25. Seems well alive and plenty enough available. Anything but dead.
Yeah, so I think the point missed here is that it's not been discontinued yet, but it's going to be. But as for availability, there'll be other forms available, and the existing stock is going to be plentiful. It'll never run out, but at most the price might go up. Stefan Weilhartner 4415 says, an ICE 40 FPGA is cheap, the same price as Z80. It has an open source tool chain, and in the 8K version, you can probably fit in a Z80 and a 6502 or 65816 and a 16-bit MSP 430 core and a DRAM controller and a CPU bus controller to have a universal, powerful retro CPU that you could slap in a C64, C128, Atari Z800, Atari 7800, Sinclair, and have extra memory with an added DRAM. So maybe this little FPGA is going to become, I don't know, a little switch on the side. You can tell it what it is and you stick it into
a switch.
Replace them.
How old are you, Dave? A switch? No. We don't need a physical switch. There'll be a soft switch, won't they? Or you just flash it. You flash it to do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Or a lever.
a lever, yeah.
Next to your C64.
A great big metal throw switch.
Yes, that's what we want.
Gunk. Slowly Making Things Smoke says the newer E variant, the Z80, is still being produced. It's just the older package versions that have been retired. We will be fine. A couple of people came to with a link to a GitHub page, which is for Z80 Open Silicon. In the wake of it being discontinued, there's a new project being created to make an open source compatible Z80. So the Z80 is absolutely not dead.
Stop
and if
panicking.
anything,
Stop the panic, Dave. Stop everyone panicking. Panic. Calm down. Calm down.
Don't panic.
Grab your towel.
Yeah. If anything, the announcement has stirred things up and got people creating, but I hope that you got that conclusion from what we said last week anyway. We weren't trying to panic you. A fair bit of agreement on vinyl record prices, and a few people pointing out the second-hand records are cheap. So with that, I'd be trading the nice, new, fresh seal vinyl for the enjoyment of thumbing through things in record shops, which is, I guess, a nice thing to do.
Yeah, and I guess in a good, nice, friendly, independent record shop, there'd probably be the chance to pop the record on, have a listen, and check it's okay before you take it home. So I think the risk is pretty low in buying used from the right shops.
Well, I've washed records in the kitchen sink. I've got a clamp that covers the paper label. I wash in the kitchen sink, and it seems to help a lot. You can't get rid of all the crackles, but unless there's a physical scratch on it, you can get rid of any crackles that actually matter, the big, loud, annoying ones. Anything else is just the nice little crackles that we all like. Nice.
Should we check what's in your briefs?
What's in my briefs today? 35 years of the Game Boy, thanks to Elk 1984. So the Game Boy, I never had one, but my little brother did, and he had Mario and Super Mario. I'm not going to say which Super Mario it is because I always get it wrong. And avoid comments that way. World. Was it World?
World, yes.
World. Super Mario Curly Whirly. And Tetris on it. And that was enough for him. And it was a nice little device. Did you have a Game Boy?
Did I have I didn't own one. I remember borrowing one off a friend for a while. So I got my fix when it was new and current and tried it out. We've had this conversation on the show before. It was okay. I wasn't blown away by it. I liked my friend's Lynx more, but I never played that outside of his house where it was always plugged into the wall.
Yeah, Lynx Africa. I know that Reese has just put a video of him making a brand new Game Boy Advance from a kit, which looked pretty cool. link in the show notes to 35 years of the Game Boy.
Yeah, all of the briefs that we talk about are stories that weren't picked out to talk about in detail, but they are on the subreddit and the links are in the show notes to enjoy them all. Such as this one from G7FVY says, a video from a YouTube channel based in the USA visiting British computer museums. Oh, sorry, G7FVY has a video visiting museums, including the Cave. It was a pleasure to meet him and then to see the video that he compiled. This was the chap also who donated the Sublogic flight simulator. Do you remember you saw that in my glass cabinet? The one that went on to evolve and become Microsoft Flight Simulator. So that was just a really lovely surprise when he came. And yeah, the Cave features in his video, very complimentary about it, as well as the Centre for Computing History. And where else does he go? Lots of other places.
And it's the channel is called Userlandia.
Userlandia.
Correct, Userlandia. Good little video. I enjoyed it. Yeah. There is Atari news. So thanks to Soggy Fennel 448 for submitting both of these little things. Google is seemingly going to demolish an old Atari building in Sunnyvale. Is this symbolic of something, Neil?
Is it? Oh,
I don't know.
Don't know. Is it?
The old Google expanding and Atari being knocked down for it? Does it mean something? I don't know. And Atari are reviving Infogrames to restart it, and they say primarily through expansion. So they came out with Alone in the Dark and other things. Neil, do you think you'd rather have Atari branding on something or Infogrames?
Hang on. Didn't Infogrames buy Atari?
Yes.
So how are Atari reviving Infogrames?
Because they bought Atari, then dropped the Infogrames and became Atari.
Right.
So they bought Atari, they hollowed out the corpse, they wore it as a mask, and now they're going to take the mask off, and Infogrames as a brand was dropped, and they're now going to restart that brand through acquisitions. I don't know. I'm not sure that's a great idea. I think Atari is much more iconic. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I mean, it's a brand that has value amongst our demographic. We remember Infogrames fondly, whether it's Alone in the Dark or any other games that they brought out. What else did they bring out? Was North and South an Infogrames game?
Could have been.
Remember now.
Alone in the Dark 2?
Yeah, Alone in the Dark 3. So yeah, I'm not surprised they're reviving it. I mean, at least Atari now are focusing on games and not crypto and all the rest of it.
I'm pleased with what they're doing.
Yeah. That's all I can say about that, really. Let's see what they do with it. There's a short film about Pong from Senior Bai. Dave's put in the brackets, I've not watched it either, Neil. No, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm going to, because the link is where, Dave?
In the subreddit.
Yeah, it's a Pong gaming short film.
Yeah. Reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
Yeah. Some good back and forth in that film, I'm sure.
Naoki's 28, I don't know if this is the one that we know, has linked a promo video for The Crew from Ubisoft, which has a law firm theme to it, which is quite ironic, considering the Stop Killing Games campaign about them. I've actually written to my own MP about it, who has responded. I'll need to get back to him with more info. And Mike Daly of Lemmings fame has also let his MP know, so maybe there's legs in this. Maybe something will happen.
Maybe. Our good friend Pajako6502 links to the International Computer Club's 9th event. This is an Amigos online thing where it's nice relaxed show and tell and a chat. It's already happened. We've missed it by the time this show goes out, but there is a link to go back and watch the ICC, or International, sounds very official, International Computer Club.
Yeah, if anything, it's not official at all. You can go and join in. You can go, if you're part of their network in any way, you can go and join in and show off whatever you're doing for supposedly 5 minutes, but I don't think any of them ever lasted 5 minutes. They always go much longer. But it's quite interesting. It's quite relaxing if you've got the time to sit and just chill out to it.
Daddy John Schuler chairing it, no doubt. He'll be there.
Yeah, I think he usually comes on and gets very drunk. The last thing is Plastic Catch 8727 asking about the replacement boxes for Big Box Ultima games. Sorry, Duncan, hit that counter again. And for anyone listening, yes, it is going to happen, but the details aren't settled yet in terms of how it's done. Matchstick Dragon did reply to that post there. So he has I showed them off some months ago. He has painstakingly recreated the documents and the box for the original Big Box Ultima games, which are all getting tatty, and he's working out how to do it. He's not looking to pass them off as the real ones. They'll all say reproduction on it, and I don't actually think he's looking to make any money here. At most, just cover his costs, but he's talking about that, so it'll come out in due course, and I will let people know. Brace yourselves. Here's a story about the Amiga being allegedly ugly and uncool, and one I'm going to strongly disagree with.
Oof. Good.
Go Team Amiga. Thanks to Due Communication and to Weeping Scorpion for submitting this. I think Scorpion got there first, but I'm not sure. Celtic supporting Canadian resident expat Scot Dominic Diamond is, of course, most famous for appearing on an episode of RMC The Cave and also for Games Master. He writes a column for The Guardian, and in it he talks about his love of the Commodore Amiga. But before he gets to his love of the Commodore Amiga, he gets on to say that it looked bad and it was uncool. The Amiga looked like something you'd see a bank teller use. Sorry, Dominic, but no, the original Amiga 1000 is beautiful. And while the Amiga 500 isn't quite as nice, it's still a neat little wedge.
It is a lovely little wedgie. Did you see all the comments about Grundy last week, Dave?
I did see the comments about Grundy. I haven't put them in the housekeeping because I knew you were going to mention them here. But yeah, apparently, what's a Grundy, Neil? In some parts of England,
and a wedgie is a Grundy.
And does everyone in the world know what a wedgie is?
I think so. Some people were saying in the comments that a Grundy is just a word they use for trousers. They're Grundies.
Huh.
Oh no, sorry, underpants, Grundies. I guess that undies, Grundies, undies, Grundies. Anyway, Amigas. Are they ugly?
Didn't know, but never do. Dominic goes on to say, I know the Amiga was a computer rather than a console, but so was the ZX Spectrum, and that looked good enough to eat. Well, the Spectrum did look good. Wouldn't eat it, especially as I know lots of finger gravy had been on it, but it did look good.
And which one? There's plenty of models of Spectrum.
Toast Rack.
Toast Rack.
Toast Rack's the best one.
48k with the dead flesh would be a little easier to eat, though.
Yeah, but the Toast Rack's got toast on it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but okay, carry on. Let's not get
into that. He then says the Atari ST was no great looker either.
Oh, that's going to rub you
But
up
at
the
least
wrong
they
way.
angled the top row of function buttons to make it look like they considered it aesthetic. The Atari ST is the very height of design, and you'll say sorry for that, Dominic, you horrible man. Of course, it's not all bad. He does go on to sing the praises of the Amiga, and he redeems himself talking about the charm and humour of Worms and Lemmings, and he mentions some other greats like Dune 2, Monkey Island, etc. Neil, is the Amiga ugly, and is the Atari ST better looking?
Do you know, when I interviewed him, I don't remember him talking about the Amiga specifically or his love for the Amiga. So I'm surprised to hear his sudden decision to tell us about his love for the Amiga. In terms of design, I wouldn't say that it's the height of chic design, the Amiga, but it's certainly not ugly. And it's when you talk about ugly systems, it's really hard to pinpoint any system that you would say that's an ugly system, because the beauty of the machine is not just in the way it looks, but it's in the promise of its functionality, the promise of what it's got to offer you when you press that on button. There's lots tied up in what makes a machine beautiful or ugly. I did rack my brains, and the only one I could come up with really was the ZX Vega Plus, which is my ugly example, because it's ugly looking, but it also promises being incredibly uncomfortable to hold. It like cuts into your hands on the edges. So that's a pretty ugly machine.
Did you pick that one because there'll be no pushback if you offend people that like it?
Well, no, I seriously did sit and try and think, like, what's an ugly looking machine? I think we'll make it our question of the week.
Shall I be controversial?
Go on.
An Amstrad CPC Plus.
Yeah, but you're calling that ugly in the context of your love for the original CPC, aren't
yes, you? It's entirely subjective, because you had the original CPC and they said, no, let's chuck that lovely iconic design out and just make it look like a budget Amiga.
Yeah, and I would argue the same about the C64 bread bin being a much nicer looking machine than the C64C. Put them together, I like the bread bin. If I didn't know the bread bin existed, I would have gone, oh, the C's all right. It's It's a wedgie, it's okay. And I think all Amigas are pretty good looking when we come back to Amigas. A lot of Amigas, a lot of the ones except for maybe the CD32 and the CD-TV and those wacky ones, they have a similar design language to Apple's Snow White designs. So that's the kind of designs that Apple used from the mid-'80s to around 1990.
Were there 7 Amiga designs? Because that would have been quite good.
There were 7 Apple designs. Yeah, that's where that Snow White name came from.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact story, but it does come from that story, why it's called Snow White. And they're kind of off-white, and they've got the lines and the vents that we see on some of the Amigas and things. That's how Apple did it. Anyway, so in summary, no, Amiga is not a bad-looking machine. I don't really understand the article highlighting also that it was unloved and that it was in some way an underdog in some regions. Yes, I know the Amiga wasn't huge in America, for example, but certainly not in Europe. I would never describe the Amiga 500, for example, as an underdog in Europe, in England, in Germany. This was a big machine. When Commodore was shut down in 94, I believe in England it was still a profitable business because of the popularity of the Amiga. Yes, it was outdated, and yes, we know all the stories about where the Amiga was in 94.
You mean the UK?
In the UK, yes, sorry. What did I say?
In Scotland. You said England.
Sorry,
even though Dominic Diamond is Scottish and the Amiga was made in Scotland.
There you go, right, in the UK. I do apologise to any Scottish listeners. But Dominic Diamond, maybe he's been in Canada for too long and to remember all this.
Yeah. You haven't mentioned the Atari ST, though. Talk about the Atari ST and tell me why it's better.
I agree. It's a good-looking machine, but again, it's subjective again. The Amiga is a more attractive. The 500 is a more attractive machine to me because it was there.
You recognise what it is
in my bedroom, and it brings back all those good feelings.
It's an Amiga. It's subjectively, yeah, I understand that. On to the uncool thing. I've got an opinion here. I think in the 80s, micros were cool, at least for us, for our friends groups. But by the 90s, consoles were trying hard to be cool and micros weren't. Or at least consoles were desperate to try and look cool. If you remember all the adverts where they were desperate to appeal to teenagers and appear edgy, and when you look back at them now, they're simply misogynist, they're edgelord nonsense, they are possibly even offensive, but they were so desperate to appear to get that kind of view across. And maybe if you're talking about kind of early-ish 90s, maybe the Amiga was uncool in comparison to that.
It makes you wanna listen to Sunshine on a Rainy Day and punch the air, Dave. I think we should, the advert I'm referring to. I think we should close off this story by doing that together, and Duncan can freeze frame us. You ready to punch the air and be cool?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Yeah. Time now for our community question of the week. And last week's question was all about deceleration. How do you like to decelerate in modern life? Are there things that you could do quicker but choose not to? How do you apply a little bit of digital mindfulness to your life?
Digital mindfulness.
Digital mindfulness. That would be a good, podcast name or book name.
Mandatory learning at work. Digital mindfulness.
Tick the box. Go to the website. Let HR know you've completed it. Right, our question then. Have you turned off contest mode, Dave?
Yes, it's off. We've slammed ourselves out of contest mode. The doors have slammed shut on the anonymity of it. Or
Super.
The random order.
Okay, so the top answer is from Doer of Oaks. It says, I load Spectrum games from tape or TZX Duino on my Spectrum despite having a Div MMC. I like the wait, and often the wait is better than the game I'm waiting for. So that's interesting. So I've got the Div MMC with the SD card in for instant loading, but likes to just sit and wait for that to load.
We do like a tape, though.
I like it from time to time. I wouldn't do it with every game. Sometimes I just want to get into the game and play. But listening to the loading sound, watching the title screen slowly appear. It's nice.
What does the loading sound like?
Duncan will need to edit this in for me, but this is my best impression.
Happy Coding ZX says, and this time he's not cheating, Stick on a record from the 70s, code games on a machine from the 80s, and reminisce about my triumphs in the 90s while wondering where the noughties and the teenies went to.
Yeah, the noughties are a bit of a blur, aren't they? The noughties and the teenies. Are they for you? For me, it's like, what happened there? Where did they go?
We don't have any. We can't define those eras quite the same way as we can the other ones.
Yeah. And then Jeff Mendoza says, I fix things. Nearly everything that I fix could be cheaply and quickly replaced, but I like to fix things. The more pointless, the better. Making a new battery cover for a cheap TV remote control. Ideal. Fixing things is my ADHD hyper-focus time. Time melts away and I end up with something better than new. This is also my passive opposition to the modern grind culture. I strive to prevent my free time from being economically productive. That's nice. And then C3R7X replies with that quote, I strive to prevent my free time from being economically productive, and says, this is the way. This is the way. So good mindfulness. Lots of other great answers, including what have we got here? Someone using their Mr. reading an old book about Z80 assembly routines. Pajako says, I watch a lot of videos at 2 speed. Double the speed. But I'm going to say cooking. So many people these days opt for packaged food or takeaways. Yeah, I love cooking because the only time I get to cook like a nice meal is when I've got the time to cook a nice meal. You know, you can't rush cooking a nice meal. So I do get a lot of enjoyment from having the time. Maybe the family's coming over on a Sunday and making a roast or something like that. I like that. Any others stood out for you in the answers there, Dave?
Yeah. C Worldliness 7525 says, like Dave's PCW, I have a Scion Series 7 that I use for writing and playing Infocom games. So when he says Infocom games, he doesn't necessarily mean games that Infocom published. He means games made that fit their Z machine format. So that's a lot of modern stuff as well, potentially. No internet, no email. I also listen to my audiobooks and podcasts on my iPod mini for the same reason.
Nice.
And I thought I'd open the box up, and this is the cassette tape from Memories of Infocom. There we go. I'll be playing that at some point soon.
I'll just pick one more out from Tech Made Easy UK. He says, I pick up an old computer to restore, and then I think to myself, hey, I'll record this for YouTube, and it immediately takes 10 times as long. I can relate. So go and check out Tech Made Easy UK on YouTube and watch him mindfully repair computers. So our question of the week this week, let's go back to those uncool computers. What is the most uncool computer? I had trouble coming up with examples. Dave had trouble coming up with examples. Dominic Diamond thinks the Amiga is uncool. What do you think is the most uncool computer? Let us know your answers. The question of the week will be pinned on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Once again, if you'd like to support the show and you enjoy listening to us every Saturday, what is wrong with you? But we appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro where you can support us. Anywhere else you want them to go, Dave, this week?
No, just go enjoy yourself. You can listen to that podcast I said at the start if you want to. I won't urge you to. If you fancy listening to another podcast, which I thoroughly enjoy, then go to retroadventurers.com.
I also, on the subject of podcasts, really enjoyed the Ted Dabney Experience, their recent podcast episode, which was about the Strong Museum of Play. And they were talking to the curators there about how they run a museum, how they curate their collection and video game history. So check out Ted Dabney as well. Thanks, everyone.
I always feel like a little bit of a fraud when we talk about other podcasts that are better than us. And I think
podcasts that do it proper, like
I know. We're a bit. Why do people listen to us?
Well, we appreciate that you do. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you at the same time, same channel, same place next week. Take care. Bye bye. He's waving.
I'm waving too. Neil's waving.
He's waving.
Both of us are waving. See you next week.
Waving.
Yeah.
Dave's pumped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RNC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Stiles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for Out of Date Tech.